Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Anupama, Professor at Department of Economics, Punjab University, Patiala. I am going to talk about module Population and Rural-Urban Migration from Population, Urbanization and Poverty. So, students, we are going to discuss about the causes, costs and benefits of migration from rural to urban areas. We will also discuss the trends, patterns and other related issues of rural-urban migration in India. The main objectives of this module are to examine the causes of migration, the impact of migration, the cost and benefits of migration, rural to urban migration, trends and patterns in India, components of urban population growth and their relative contribution, migration rates for males and females in urban areas, employment related migration among males and females, and about the basic amenities in urban areas. The world today is witnessing unprecedented rates of urbanization. These trends have also witnessed movement of millions of people from rural to urban areas. This may have happened due to wide socio-economic differences in rural and urban areas. Theoretically, the migration from rural to urban areas is analyzed into the framework of structural transformation of the economies. At the micro level, neoclassical migration theory views migrants as individual, rational actors who decide to move on the basis of a cost-benefit calculation. Assuming free choice and full access to information, they are expected to go where they can be the most productive, that is, are able to earn the highest wages. This capacity obviously depends on specific skills of a person possesses and the specific structure of the labor markets. Neoclassical migration theory sees rural-urban migration as a constituent part of the whole development process, by which surplus labor in rural sector supplies the workforce for the urban industrial economy. The Lewis model states that migration continues until whole of the surplus labor released by the rural areas is absorbed by the urban sector. This shows that migration of the labor force is actually a function of the demand for labor in urban markets. However, Harris and Todaro state that rural-urban migration continues even during rising rate of unemployment in urban areas. They say the migration from rural to urban area is function of expected income differential, that is, the income differential adjusted for the probability of finding an urban job. It is assumed that as long as rural-urban income differences remain high enough to outweigh the risk of becoming unemployed, the lure of relatively higher permanent incomes will continue to attract a steady stream of rural migrants. However, the stance of neoclassical theory that the migration is a rational choice of the individuals is challenged by the historical structuralists who state that migration may not have occurred simply because individuals have a free choice, but also because they are fundamentally constrained by structural forces. Rather than a matter of free choice, people are many times forced to move because traditional economic structures have been undermined as a result of their incorporation into the global economic system. Through these processes, rural populations become increasingly deprived of their traditional livelihoods, and these uprooted populations become part of the urban proletariat to the benefits of those core areas that rely on cheap labor. However, the line separating the true phenomena of choice and force behind migration is not clear. This obscurity about the exact cause behind the migration decision has led many researchers to analyze the migration tendencies into the framework of push and pull factors. Thus, people may migrate from rural to urban areas due to loss of traditional occupations, agrarian crisis, famines, poor living conditions, and no chances of upward mobility, and also due to attractions of the urban areas in terms of better employment opportunities, higher incomes, better healthcare, education, and other facilities. Thus, rapid geographic shift of people from rural to urban regions in different countries has been the result of the combination of both rural push and urban pull factors. This rural-urban migration in developing countries is accompanied by positive and negative consequences for the area of origin and destination. For the rural people, in the short run, it may help to alleviate the poverty by creating new income and employment opportunity, and it has helped in facilitating rural-urban economic and social integration and motivating the expansion of the urban sector. Later, this alarming migration process has led to congestion, unemployment, pollution, and poverty in urban areas, gender and age imbalances, and decrease in productivity in rural areas. In this perspective, we may enlist a few causes and effects of rural-urban migration. Let us first discuss the causes of rural-urban migration. There can be a number of socio-economic and political push and pull factors leading to migration of people from rural to urban areas. Some of these can be discussed as follows. The first cause is considered to be that of the growth pockets. Uneven development and marked spatial inequalities can be pull factors attracting the rural populations to the developed areas. This movement to the growth pockets is accentuated by improvements in communication and transport facilities. The growth pockets in any country are characterized by concentration of economic activity and hence is also characterized by greater employment opportunities, higher level of income, more amenities, and strong public infrastructure. All these things attract the persons from rural areas to urban ones. Even the slightest differences in rural and urban areas regarding these features are enough to ignite the movement from rural to urban areas, as people always expect the tendencies of improvement in urban lives. The pace of the flow of migration from rural to urban areas further increases if most of the economic activities in urban areas are labor intensive, as it raises the probability of getting a job, which has important influence upon the migration decision. Another important cause is perceptions about better life in urban areas. Apart from the economic factors, the high income groups in the rural areas, particularly the rentier class, migrate to urban centers to get a better social infrastructure, for example, health, education, etc., better amenities, luring urban cultures and lifestyles, and even the quest for independence from social, cultural, religious, and familial shackles. Next cause of rural-urban migration can be forced migration. The forced migration includes the migration due to natural disasters, which may be caused by earthquake, drought, flood, cyclone, etc. There can be certain social and political problems such as riots, terrorism, political refugees, bad law and order, and many others. It can also be due to displacement by the development projects. There are some other factors which may be causing rural-urban migration. Apart from these factors, there can be several factors such as marriage, retirement, health problems, acquisition of own house or flat, housing problems, etc., which may be leading to migration of people from rural to urban areas. The second cause can be the inability of rural areas to absorb incremental growth in labor force. A common feature of the developing economies is that the agriculture alone cannot sustain rural livelihoods. Therefore, the rural areas are always characterized by underemployment or unemployment of labor force. Low agricultural productivity, growth of rural population, and ever-increasing fragmentation of land holdings further aggravates the problem. The rise in agricultural productivity in the areas which have adopted the new agriculture technology has not provided any permanent solution to the problem of underemployment and unemployment in rural areas. For example, the Shankar argues that in India, the rate of job creation and real wage increases in agriculture have slowed down. Causes include worsening land-person ratios, water scarcity, crashing commodity prices after market liberalization, and persistent drought. Nearly two-thirds of the arable area in India is semi-arid and drought-prone, and many of these areas show very high rates of seasonal migration. In India, the main causes of internal migration are classified as employment-related reasons, the forced migration, that is the migration due to natural disasters, social political problems, or displacement of development projects, and others such as marriage, healthcare, retirement, etc. These reasons of rural-urban migration in India are given in Figure 1. The figure shows that in India, the major reason behind the decisions of the households from rural to urban areas has been employment related. This reason alone causes 66% of total migration decisions. Migration due to studies is another important reason and constitute about 21% of total migration decisions. Thus, we can say that economic factors are the major drivers of rural-urban migration. Now coming to the impact of migration. Migration may have a number of effects on the sources as well as the destination of migrants. Migration may have a number of effects on the source as well as the destination of the migrants. It helps in poverty alleviation, reduction in unemployment and underemployment at the origin of the migrants, and it may also induce economic development at the place of destination of the migrants. However, these effects can be both positive and negative, and there is no consensus of the net effects of rural-urban migration in the macroeconomic perspective. Whereas the negative voices say that too much of migration from rural to urban areas causes the shortage of labor force in the rural areas, which negatively affects the rural productivity, as those who migrate generally have better human capabilities than those who are left behind. It is also pointed out that unmanaged migration from rural to urban areas becomes a major cause of scarcities in the urban amenities and growth of the informal sector. With poor working conditions and lack of basic amenities, the life in urban areas becomes miserable, leading to many health-related and other socio-political problems. Waba, in his study on rural-urban migration, has pointed out that a major consequence of rural-urban migration is over-urbanization. He states that at some point, diseconomies of scale begin to emerge as cities become too big. Over-urbanization and its related problems, that is pollution, noise and congestion, are examples of negative externalities. The presence of such externalities causes a market to operate inefficiently. Market failure will lead to a free market solution which tends towards over-urbanization to a size of city that is above the socially desirable one, because there is a clear divergence between the private and social marginal cost. And this social cost is a combination of private cost and the external costs. This idea can be understood from figure 2. Migrants impose costs on others, for example, congestion, pollution, noise, etc. This is represented by placing marginal social cost curve above the marginal private cost curve in figure 2. In this case, private costs fail to coincide with social cost because the true social cost is equal to the private cost plus the cost that migration imposes in terms of overcrowded cities. Since the social marginal cost of migration to cities exceed the private marginal cost, there is a clear sign that too much migration is taking place. Migrants face a choice of whether to stay in the rural areas or to migrate to the cities. They will migrate as long as the benefits of migration exceed their private costs. So migration takes place up to the point where marginal private cost is equal to marginal private benefits, that is, MPC is equal to MPB, and where the size of the cities is Q0. However, the optimal size of cities is Q star. Thus, the distance Q star Q0 represents the negative external effects of migration on city dwellers, that is, the degree of over-urbanization in cities or the extent to which large cities are too big. However, the migration in itself is considered to have more of the benefits, and the cost side is always viewed in terms of failures of the local governments to manage the unstoppable and irreversible flow of migrants from rural to urban areas. Migration is considered to be a process of self-sustained growth in the long period, as it is a sign of rapid industrialization, a transformation from the traditional sector to the modern sector. It is generally believed that there is a strong association among migration, poverty reduction, and economic development. The migrant sending households receive remittances which raise their income level. These remittances help in meeting daily expenses, the expenses on education of the children, and also the health expenditure. This source of income in this way raises the level of living of the households as compared to the situation if no migration would have taken place. The remittances also help rural people to sustain rural livelihoods by preventing them from sliding further into poverty, which would be the prospect facing them had they depended solely on the deteriorating agricultural base. In case of India, NSSO found that nearly 95% of the households in the rural areas reported use of the remittances for household consumer expenditure purposes, out of which 76% had been reported to be used on food items alone. Besides, other important items of use of remittances are healthcare, education of household members, debt repayment, and savings or investment. Along with the removal of poverty, migration is also supposed to have both the negative and positive impacts on economic inequalities. It helps in reduction of economic inequalities by providing more employment opportunities in the urban areas and hence pulls the households out of mire of poverty. On the other hand, migration may also accentuate income inequalities both in the sending regions as well as the receiving regions. In the sending regions, the households receiving remittances are able to improve their lives vis-a-vis others, while the others are deprived due to less promising existing opportunities in rural areas. In the migrant receiving regions, unmanaged inflow of migrants is also associated with increase in urban poverty and informal employment. Those who are not able to get a decent job with sufficient wages are forced to live in slums and shanties with poor, unhealthy living conditions. Thus, a city with skyscrapers also has a face of vast slum areas in other parts. Ironically, such inequalities increase with the size of the city. On the positive side, migration is considered to be a major driver of economic growth, as it not only raises the per capita income of urban residents but also contributes to the rural economy through regular rural-urban linkages and return flows. In urban economies, they are instrumental in maintaining the supply of cheap labor. Thus, as the economic activity spurs in a particular area, it is never marred by the scarcity of human resources, and profits never shrink due to rise in cost of labor. On the other hand, migration is responsible for generation of additional demand for manufactured goods and services. The combined effect of such supply side and demand side inducements can be realized in growth of GDP. A study in China has found that the labor migration from rural to urban areas contributed about 16% of total GDP. Now let us discuss about trends and patterns in India. The growth of population in Indian cities is more contributed by the internal migration, unlike the cities in the developed countries where it is mainly contributed by international migrants. Generally, urbanization is spurred in part by natural population growth in urban areas, alongside migration from rural areas and due to expansion of existing cities as well as emergence of new cities. In India, major component of population growth is still natural growth. However, in 2011, out of approximately 92 million increase in urban population, about 40 million was contributed by the natural growth of population and about 22 million was due to net rural to urban migration. The contribution of rural to urban migration has been consistently increasing since 1961. Hence, if we trace the rates of change of components of growth of urban population, we may see from figure 3b that the rate of natural growth has declined from 59% in 1991 to 44% in 2001 to 11. While the rate of net rural to urban migration has marginally increased from 21% in 1991 to 2001 to 24% in 2001 to 11. Another feature of migration in India is that the migration rate for females are higher than that of the males. However, if we go by the reasons of migration, the females migrate mainly due to marriage or due to migration of the family, while males migrate due to employment reasons. Figure 4a shows that migration of females has increased from 36.6% in 1983 to 45.6% in 2007-8, while the migration of the males has remained stable at around 26%. Therefore, the increase in overall migration rate in urban areas from 31.6% in 1983 to 35.4% is mainly due to increase in migration of the females. But the migration of the women for purpose of employment has actually declined during this period. Figure 4b shows that the migration of the females for employment reason has declined from 49 per thousand in 1983 to merely 27 per thousand in 2007-8, while the corresponding figures for the males have increased from 415 per thousand to 557 per thousand during the same period, indicating that migration of males is quite higher for employment-related reasons as compared to the females, whose migration is mainly family-oriented. While whole issue of migration mainly focuses upon benefits of migration, above gender division of migration by purpose of migration itself shows that women will be benefited from migration only if the family as a whole are benefited. However, the studies on informal employment in urban areas, urbanization of poverty, and depleting quality of urban life feel that migrant households are socially, economically, and politically excluded in the urban areas. The Human Development Report of 2009 states that the migrants, particularly the temporary and irregular migrants, are often deprived of health and education facilities, which are, however, equally enjoyed by the natives and the permanent migrants. These facilities are further constrained for the migrants in the developing regions, as these regions already have inadequate facilities for their own natives. Therefore, the migrants are further marginalized. The trends suggested by this report relate to the international migrants, but are also suggestive of the conditions of internal migrants who face a similar situation regarding the access to basic services, particularly when cities find themselves unable to cope with increasing influx of migration. Recent data by National Sample Survey Organization of India on housing condition and amenities shows that in 2008, 25% of urban households in India had no access to drinking water within their premises. 22% had no bathroom, 15% had no access to drainage facility, and 11% did not have any toilet facility. And the percentage of households having none of the facilities of drinking water, toilet, and electricity is as high as 32%. Since migrants are further marginalized in access to urban amenities, we can easily imagine their positions, particularly of those who live in slums. According to an estimate by UN Habitat, the slum population in India in 2001 was 158 million, which was estimated to increase to 184 million in 2010. Thus, we can easily imagine the quality of urban life, and since all the social protection programs are less geared towards the migrants, rather they exclude them because the migrants do not have any documents to register themselves as beneficiaries of the ongoing programs. The lack of proof or identity becomes a major cause of their exclusion from any welfare program, and hence their living conditions remain deplorable. Looking at the contribution of the migrants to the urban economy, the exclusion of these major drivers of growth from the distribution process is unacceptable and demands urgent policy attention. By managing migration in order to maximize the benefits, while the reducing cost and risks requires effective partnership between the governments, civil society, private sector organizations, and donors. It is essential for state, province, governments to cooperate with each other to develop flexible social services and pro-poor schemes that can be accessed by people on the move. Protective legislation and social security provisions are urgently needed for migrants. The policymakers are needed to recognize the importance of migration for poverty reduction and development at the earliest. They should aim to ease the hardship of migrants in order to distribute the benefits of growth as evenly as possible. For this purpose, there is a great need to build human capabilities over the long term so that people who currently have to depend initially on less sustainable livelihood strategies after their migration in urban areas can diversify into more remunerative options in later time period. So students, let us summarize what we have learned in this module. To sum up, it can be stated that migration from rural to urban areas goes hand in hand with growth and development. But it can have both cost and benefits for households and individuals, as well as the economies and the societies. Migration needs to be facilitated through a proper development strategy and a coherent policy, so its benefits can be maximized at all levels. A growth strategy which transfers large cost of subsistence to the poorer migrants themselves will ultimately defeat the objectives of both growth and development. It should be well recognized that the current trends of urbanization are unstoppable and irreversible. Therefore, instead of thinking ways of controlling the movement of people to urban areas, the government should focus upon improving the quality of life through increased provision of basic amenities in rural and urban areas. The rural-urban gap in these amenities should be eliminated. The rural-urban gap in these amenities should be eliminated completely so that people should not be moving to urban areas merely for getting these facilities. People should always be on move towards urban areas, from small cities and towns to metropolitan cities in a rapidly industrializing economy. That's all with today's lecture. I hope you must have enjoyed this lecture. Thank you.